Hi, in this video we are gonna go diving with dolphins. This video is all about images. So as you can see on this page, I have a nice big image which is actually a background image behind this text. I also have here a background image for the whole page which repeats across the whole page. I have two images placed that interact with text, one on the left side, one on the right side. And finally, I have a rollover image that looks like one thing but changes to another image when I move my mouse over it. So in this video, I'll show you how to do all these things. So let's get started by setting up our file in Dreamweaver. So as before, create a new image. I'm going to give it a title and create. I'll save this file and name it just the way we've been naming our previous assignments. So you'll do the same thing with your first name here. And the first thing I'll do is add a CSS file, create a new one. This is going to be called, it's in my site files folder, I'll call it images.css. Link as usual and click OK. Alright, I'm going to start off by setting the page background image, which is this tiled image that repeats across the whole page. How do we do that? Like with any CSS rule, we need to have a selector first, and the page background image is applied to the body tag. So in my code view, I'm just going to click into the body tag, then I come up to CSS Designer, add a new selector, and Dreamweaver says body. Hit enter to confirm the selector, and then go up to the background section of the CSS properties. Now I'm going to include all these images in a zip file for you, and to show you how I've organized them, inside my site files folder I made a folder called images, and that contains all the final web-ready images that I'm going to use on my page. So I'm going to send you a zip file with all these images, and then you create an images folder under your site files folder and place all these images there. So for my page, I've got the body selector chosen. I'm in the background properties. I go to background image and it says URL. There's this little browser icon. I'm going to click and browse for the background image, which is Dolphin tile. So here's what happens when I choose it. It's already repeating across my page. This is the default for any background image that you choose. Let's say you want a background image that only occurs once and you do not want it repeated, then you're going to have to select under the background repeat property, no repeat. If I click that now, you'll see that only one dolphin tile shows up. So I'm gonna undo that, and Dreamweaver is gonna repeat it across the page. So I'll go ahead and save all and show you what this page looks like in the browser. So this is what the page looks like with a background image that's repeating across the whole page. Next, I'm going to start creating these sections. So I'm going to start building out this page one section at a time. My first section is this hero section. We call it a hero section because it really makes a dramatic entrance as soon as you load the page. It's the first thing that you see. It really grabs people's attention, and it's like full width, it's immersive. So this is just a div, and I'm going to give it a name of hero. So where do I place this? This div is going to appear at the beginning of the page body. So in my CSS code, I place my cursor right after the opening body tag. Then I go up to the insert menu, go div, at insertion point. Now I want to give this the ID of hero. I could give it a name here, but here's the issue. When I click OK, you'll notice that Dreamweaver did add a div. It added some placeholder content, but it did not add the ID that I had tried to assign to it. This seems to be a bug, so I'm going to just add it manually. So look how I do it. My cursor is inside the div tag. I'm going to put a space, ID equals, and then double quotes. I'm just typing one double quote, but Dreamweaver types the second one automatically, and my cursor is in between the double quotes. And then I just type the ID that I want to assign. In this case, HERO, hero. So I've added a div of ID hero. I'm going to keep my cursor here inside the ID, go up to selectors, and add a selector. Now when there's an ID, the selector begins with a hash sign. Just like with a class, the selector began with a period symbol. So I hit enter. So hash hero selects the div that has ID hero. Now there's a few things I want to set. My hero div is going to be full width, and I also want it almost full height. I'm going to introduce to you a new way of sizing your divs. Instead of using percentages, earlier we used 100%, I'm going to introduce a new unit to you, and this unit, there are two units actually. The unit for width is called VW, or viewport width, and the unit for height is called VH, or viewport height. So what is the viewport? The viewport is this part of the browser window that can be seen on the screen. You know, the page is much longer than what can be seen in one frame of the window, but this single frame is the viewport. So VW refers to the width of my browser window, and VH refers to the height of my browser window. And the way we write this unit, full width is written as 100 VW, and full height is written as 100 VH. But I don't want my hero div to be 100 height, because if people open this page and just see this image diving with dolphins, they may think that's the end of the page. So by keeping it a little shorter in height, I can see the beginning of my paragraph of text, so it encourages people to scroll down and read. So back to Dreamweaver, here's the hero. I'm going to double click in width and say 100 VW, and in height, for now I'm going to show you 100 VH, and then I'll come back and correct it. Next thing I want to do is give a background image to this div. So this dolphin image is actually assigned as a background image to a div, which is different from the background image assigned to the whole page. Go to the background section, background image, browse, and choose the dolphin swimming image. Now, this image is really big, and right now in Dreamweaver I have a small window, so the image gets cut off quite badly. But there is a fix to this. There's a background size property that specifies how should this background be scaled to fit the div. So the option that I'm going to use for background size is called cover. Now watch what happens with cover. I'm going to save all and refresh it here to show you what cover means. Now here's, first off, we have 100 VW for width, 100 VH for height. So it fills the screen, but you notice there's a little margin around here. So like in a previous tutorial that I had, I need to go to my body tag and set the margins to 0, which will get rid of this space. But let me show you what cover does. So cover tries to fit the whole div with your background image, and when the window resizes, the background image will automatically adjust in size. So you notice sometimes it gets cut off, sometimes it doesn't. It all depends on the window size. The good thing about cover is you will never see any space, you will never have any part of the div that is not covered by the background image. Even if the background image has to get clipped, it's okay. But it'll do everything it can to cover the whole div, which is great for a hero image because we really want to create a splash when people load the page. So back to Dreamweaver, I'm going to go back up to body, layout, click the chain link and set the margin to 0 pixels, which gets rid of all those margins around my hero div. I'm going to save all, refresh this, and you notice the margin went away. And see what a big difference that makes. Just by eliminating those margins, this div and the background image creates such a big impact upon loading the page. Now the issue with having 100 viewport height, as I said, is it doesn't encourage the visitor to go on and scroll to see the rest of the page. So I'm going to reduce the height of my hero div to 90% of the viewport height, or 90 VH. So let's save and refresh. So by having a little bit of a gap at the bottom, where of course once I add the text, readers will be able to see the text, it implies that there's something more to this page and encourages them to scroll down and read it. So here I have a nice big headline, Diving with Dolphins. I've placed it inside a paragraph, but I've styled the paragraph. In fact, my hero div has a top padding and a left padding just to give some space around this paragraph. It has white text in this font, and the font size is at 63 pixels. I'm going to apply all of these properties in my hero div and my hero P now. So under hero, I'm going to turn off show set so I can see all the properties, go up to text. Now we covered this last time in the typography. Text color, font family, font size, and back to layout, I also have some padding. So watch what happens. When I added the padding, I got the effect I wanted up here, but the padding also added to the height of my div. As I mentioned before, the margin and padding will usually add to the width and height of your div. In this case, I've carefully sized the div so it's full width and it's 90% of the height of the browser window, so I don't want that to happen. So what if you want to add margins and padding but you don't want to affect the size of the div? Here's a workaround. Under the layout properties of CSS, there is a property called box sizing. Without getting into the details of this, I'm just going to describe these two options, the two main options. The default is content box, and in the content box setting, your margins and padding will add to the dimensions of the div. But if I change it to border box, my margins and padding will not add to the dimensions of the div. The browser will automatically adjust for it. So it'll keep the overall dimensions intact even as it adds the padding. It will not expand the div. So this is more like what I wanted. Just going to replace the text now to this, diving with dolphins. Now you notice as soon as I created a paragraph, it expanded the line spacing, it shifted it down. So this is why I had to create a selector for hero P. So you notice in the code I have two paragraphs now. So I'm going to go up to, with my cursor inside one of the P tags, I add a new selector. It says hash hero P, which means all paragraphs inside the div of name hero. Hit enter. I'm just going to copy the values from here. I had set the top margin to 18 and line height to 1.5 em. Em is a unit in typography which stands for the height of the capital letter M. So back to this page. Top margin 18 pixels, which moved my text up, and line height 1.5 em. So I still have a lot of space here, and I realize it's because these two are separate paragraphs. That is not what I wanted. When you are typing in Dreamweaver and you hit enter or return, it starts a new paragraph. But in this case, I did not want to start a new paragraph, just a new line. I have to do it in the code. Okay, now it's all one paragraph, but I want the word dolphins to go on a new line. So instead of hitting enter or return, I hit shift enter or shift return. And that means a line break, not a paragraph break. So my hero section is done. Going to save all and preview. This is my hero section, and as I resize the div, it nicely adapts, the image adapts to the width of and height of my browser window. Back in Dreamweaver, I'm ready to add the main section of the page. So like we did before, I'm gonna find the right place. It's right after my hero div ends. I'm gonna position my cursor there and then go up to Insert, Section. I don't need any class or ID, it's just a section like before. And like I did before, let me add a selector for it. I don't need to say body section, I'll just say section. Like before, I'm going to set the width to 80%. Left margin to auto, right margin to auto, so that my section is always centered on my page and there's a little bit of space on the left and right. Now, to fill up this page, I'm going to get some dummy text, and I'll show you where to get that. So many designers often use this Latin dummy text that begins with the words lorem ipsum, and you can get it from this website, lipsum.com. So you tell it how much text do you want. I said I want 5 paragraphs. Click generate, and it's generated all these paragraphs for me. I'm going to go ahead and copy them. Go to Dreamweaver, go inside this section and paste. So it has pasted it without paragraph breaks. I'm just going to pause this video while I add in the paragraph breaks again, and then I'll return. Okay, I've gone through and added some paragraph breaks to my text. I'll quickly go over the formatting of the section itself so we can get to the main focus of this video, which is the images. So to get the formatting of the section, I'll go to the finished page and just look up some properties. I have a top margin of 45 pixels, bottom margin of 90, and all this, the font properties are actually coming from the body tag. So I'm going to look up the typography settings in the body tag. I set the font family to this, font size to 16, line height to 1.5 EM. So back to body. Font family, font size, and line height. And in section, I had top margin of 45 pixels, bottom margin of 90 pixels. Okay, I'm just copying these values over because I want to get to the fun part, which is the images. So my section is ready to drop the images in. You notice as the page grows longer, I keep seeing more of the tiled background image. Okay. So my first image in the body is going to be this tall one. I'll put it right at the beginning of the second paragraph, and I'll show you how to align it and space it out. So since I'm in live view up here, I'm temporarily going to switch to design view. Put my cursor right in front of the second paragraph. Go insert, image. And this is the one. Okay, so this image is rather big. It's actually bigger than my section. Of course, I could go back to Photoshop and scale it, but I'm going to show you a trick where you can actually resize images in Dreamweaver. I wouldn't recommend using this all the time because you want to make sure that your original images are light and quick to load. But in a pinch, you can actually resize images using HTML. So this image, as you see in the code, is 800 pixels wide and 1067 pixels tall. So if I change the width here to 300 pixels, watch what happens. It does get narrower, but you notice now it's squished because I didn't change the height. I could use a calculator to figure out what the proportional height would be, but there's an easier way. In HTML, I just remove the height property in the image tag. I'm going to delete that. So I'm only specifying the width. So in this case Dreamweaver, but in the final case the web browser will automatically figure out the height to keep it proportional. And let's click here to see. So by just specifying the width, Dreamweaver figured out the height on its own. So that's a good size for the image, but I want the text to be right here next to it. And the way to do this, the way to get images and text to interact and sit side by side, is using the float property, which we had covered before. I'm not just going to, where am I going to add the float property? I will assign a class to this image, and then I'll assign the float property to that class using CSS. So I select the image, go into my code view, and right here, right after the img, I'm going to say class equals, and the name of this class I'm giving it is align left. So all images that are aligned on the left side of the text will share the same class. So with my cursor in the class align left, I add a selector. The properties are actually very simple. Watch. I scroll past all the widths and everything, go to float, and click float left. Watch what happens. The paragraph sits to the right of the image, but it's also sticking to the image. I want some space here between the image and the text. So I go back up to margin and set some right margin. Just going to click and drag on the 0 till I get a good value. I think about 30 pixels should be good. So these are the properties for my left aligned images. Float left and a right margin of about 30 pixels. Let's go on to the next image. My next image comes on at my fourth paragraph and it's wide. Okay. So I place my cursor here. Again, this is in design view. I can do the same in code view, but live view will not be very good for this part. I place my cursor, insert image, choose this one. Again, it's rather big, so in my code view, I change the width to 500 pixels, remove the height property completely, and while I'm at it, I'm going to give it a class. This one is align right. There's my image. I put my cursor inside the class here, add a selector, hit enter. Now you know what to do here. This time I'm going to go to float and choose right. And because I want some space between the image and text, I'm going to give it a left margin of about 30 pixels. So there you have it. An image floated to the left with a little space on the right. An image floated to the right with a little space on the left. Using classes makes it really easy to do things like this. I'm going to go ahead and save. Reload the page. Now you can see why I kept my hero section only 90% of the window height. As soon as you see that there's some paragraphs here, it opens your curiosity and you want to read more, so you will scroll down. This is what my images look like. I'm going to resize the window and show you what happens here. You see with the float property, the text will just wrap around the image depending on how much space you give it. This is what the float property does when you have images and text side by side. I'm almost done with the page. There is one more part to add, which is a call to action, the Book Now button at the bottom. So back to Dreamweaver. Right after my section ends, I'm going to add another div, and I'll give it a class, call to action. Remember, I added some margin under my section, and that's what you see here. So my call to action, let me just look up its properties here. It's got width of 80%, left and right margin of auto, text align of center, and you'll see why. So back here in my page that I'm creating, click inside the class call to action, add a selector, hit enter, and then set the properties. Width of 80%, left margin and right margin of auto, and this time you notice with all these properties it aligns with my page section quite nicely, but all of the text is aligned to the left side. That's the default alignment, but I want my call to action button to be in the center. So this is why I'm going to go up to text properties, choose text align center. Even though my div is going to contain an image, not text, but still the text align property applies. I also have a bottom margin of 60 pixels assigned to the call to action div, so just so that I have some breathing room at the end of my page. The last thing I'm going to insert is the rollover image. So I'm just gonna hit enter to make space for it, and I'm going to go up to Insert, HTML, Rollover Image. A rollover image has two images, one for the normal state and one that appears when the mouse hovers over it. Let me give it a name. I'm just going to call it book now. The name is only internal. Your visitors are not going to see this, but that's just for clarity for the developer. Original image, I'm going to browse for it. This is my orange button, the book now button, and the rollover image. Preload rollover image means Dreamweaver is going to load both of these images as soon as the page loads. It's not going to wait till somebody hovers over the button to load that the yellow image, because that might introduce a delay. Somebody might hover and they see nothing and they have to wait a few seconds for the image to load, and that breaks the user experience. So we always preload the rollover images. I'm going to click OK, and here's my image. Just going to clear out this text since I don't need it anymore. I also don't need this empty paragraph. So nothing happens in design view when I hover over the image, but if I switch to live view, now you can see the rollover effect. As soon as the mouse hovers over it, it swaps out the yellow button for the orange button. When I move my mouse away from it, it swaps out the orange button for the yellow button. That's called a rollover image, and it really makes the page pop. It makes it look much more engaging and interactive. So let's go ahead, save all, back to Chrome, refresh the page, and here's my call to action button. There's no link to this button right now. It's just acting like a link, like a dummy link, so you can see the rollover effect.